Papa, we wanted to record some of your memories and experiences in life for your granddaughters and the family, because you've led a very significant and important life and helped a lot of people, and we wanted to have a recording of some of the experiences you've had that teach us about who you are and show some background about how you've influenced us in terms of a role model and all the wonderful things you've done for your family. So I wanted to start out, you could just introduce yourself as you feel you like to be introduced.
My name is Agostino Molteni. I descend from a family from northern Lombardy that has the name of Molteno, a little town, very antique, already existing at the time of the Roman Empire and probably before, and just played an important role in the history of the northern part of Lombardy. And
Papa, is Molteno near your birthplace, Como, Italy?
Yes, Molteno is about 25 miles east of Como, 15 miles from Lecco, the two major cities of the Como lakes. There is also a little lake close to the town. And definitely the first populations over there were Celtic, the Insubri. And this population was fighting ferociously against the Roman and helping Hannibal to destroy practically Italy.
Now, the Molteni family, do you have an understanding of where the first recorded history of the Molteni family is in northern Italy, Papa?
Yes. After the fall of the Roman Empire, there has been several invasions by German populations, and the mixture of Celtic, German, and Latin. The last population who got power were the Lombard or Longobard, who came down from Denmark, squeezed out by the Vikings in Denmark, and just conquering Hungary and then entering Italy and fighting in the old Greco-Roman wars. This population had many free men, Havelmann, that also gave the name to the roots Baron. And these free men have the right to carry the swords. We don't have any information of the family until 1274, when the ruler of Milano, Cardinal Giovanni Visconti, that was cardinal but also fighting for the German emperors against the Pope, the Ghibelline families, just make a list of the free families that had the right to serve in the army, defend the walls of the city of Milano, and be appointed judge, canons of the cathedral, or commander for military responsibilities. The question is now whether the family came from Milano and occupied Molteno and then get the name da Molteno from Molteno when they prospered in the little town, or they came as a free people from the little town of Molteno and called the da Molteni. The list is very clear, and has been reconfirmed in 1313 with another list of noble families of the city of Milano. They participated to many wars. They were from the party of the Pope, and we have the notice that we were pardoned by, again, a member of the Visconti family, because they were for the party of the Pope, allowed to live in Milano. In 1492, one of these Molteni, named Stefano, like my uncle, and the name in the family, was the commander of the castle and the garrison of the castle of the Sforza family in Milano. The family survived different aspects and always played quite a relevant role in the church and in the government of the city. One of Professor Molteni was a professor of university and the Academy of Brera, all the museums in Milano, and the Museo Pol di Pezzoli, another great museum for medieval history and art in Milano, in Via Manzoni, one of the best streets of Milano. And part of the family migrated, probably at the time of Napoleon, in Como, and they were involved in the silk business. This area is building up with the silk. The first name, the first name that I remember is my great-grandfather, Stefano Molteni, that was a CPA and the first founder of the CPAs in the county of Como.
Who was Stefano Molteni?
Who was Stefano Molteni was my great-grandfather. He was an accountant, came from an educated family, probably working in the silk system. One of his brothers was a priest and pastor of a little town on Como Lake, Gemonio, and definitely the family was very liberal. Stefano Molteni was a captain in the National Guard and fought with the army of the French and the Piedmontese in the War of 1859 against the Austrians. It's interesting that he married another noble lady, Giuseppina Paravicini, came from another little town close to Molteno. Her father's name was Agostino, was related to the family of Volta, the physicist, professor, and the inventor of the battery, and was professor of mathematics and physics and principal of the Lyceum under the Austrian government, because until 1859, Lombardy was a section of the Lombard Venetian kingdom where Maximilian, the Emperor of Mexico, was the viceroy ruling in the name of his brother, Kaiser Franz Joseph.
Stefano's children, who were they?
Stefano had quite a few children. Many of them were again in the business, banking or silk, and it's amazing that all his brother-in-law, the brother of his wife Paravicini, were high officer of the Austrian Imperial Army. So it was something like the war of North and South in the United States. People of the same family fighting from the different sides.
Did the Moltenis fight in the Italian War of Unification?
One of the Italian War of Unification, the Third Independence War, 1859-1860. Even from my mother's side, the family Bono, a lawyer, was a major in the army of Garibaldi, fighting the Battle of Bezzecca when they defeated very drastically the Austrian and had the open way to go to Vienna.
Your mother, Antonietta,
Yes.
Her family also fought in the War of Italian Independence, correct?
Yes, just that was also a liberal family, both from the mother's side and the father's side. And my great-great-grandmother, Giulia Vertua, the mother of my grandmother, nursed all the soldiers in the Independence War of 1859-60. And then support the Legion of Garibaldi. And she was so close to Garibaldi and supporting the independent movement that she received an autograph of Garibaldi that now is in the house of your brother Ronald, Claudio.
And it was an autograph?
Yes, with
it was
an
an autograph?
Yes.
It was an autographed photograph?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes. It's amazing that on the other side, the family kept contact with the Paravicini family, even if after World War I, the big World War, and some of the people had a beautiful palace in Vienna, and they were generals and marshal in the Austrian Imperial Army. And they had the same name, Agostino, like me, because they were nephews and great-nephews of this professor of physics related to Alessandro Volta.
You had a relative who was a physician similar to you,
yes,
who fought in World War I. Is that correct?
Yes, that was my grandfather, Emilio Signorini, that was a cardiologist, a pneumonologist. He was interned at a hospital in Paris, then in Vienna, and then in Dresden. And then he came, opened a practice in Milano. He was very liberal, and he could not practice medicine in the last year of the fascism because he was never accepted to become member of the fascist party.
During World War I, he worked in the no man's land, helping wounded soldiers, both Italian and Austrian. Is that correct?
Yes, and then he was going out for the stretcher and make a triage as a physician. And at the time of the fascists, he was accused to take care very carefully of the soldiers of the Austrian Empire, Austro-Hungarian and so on.
And in fact, didn't he receive a Medal of Honor from both the Italian government for saving soldiers' lives in no man's land, and also a similar medal from the Austrian government?
Yes, through the Swiss Red Cross. And he was accused by the fascists to be unpatriotic because as a physician, he took care of that. And when I was 6 years old, I remember that some fascist waited for him when he was coming home from the hospital.
Some fascists, you said thugs?
Thugs, yes. And they beat him up and they threw away the Medal of Valor that he has received in World War I.
And was that Medal of Valor similar to the Professor Emeritus badge you're wearing on your jacket.
Yes.
He would wear it on his jacket, correct?
Yes, he was wearing his jacket, at the bottom of his jacket. Instead of wearing the little spin of the fascist membership of the fascist party that every educated person was supposed to wear, he was always wearing this medal of valor, thinking that this demonstration of patriotism should be very, very clear. The fascists, they stuck it out from his jacket and they beat him up and said that he was not worthy to carry this kind of medal.
And he risked his life in the war for Italians.
Yes.
Italian soldiers.
Yes, Italian soldiers and every wounded soldiers by triage. Just that is the point.
And he did not carry a weapon, even though they gave him a weapon.
No, he didn't want to carry a weapon, but every military officer should carry a pistol, a Beretta pistol. And this Beretta pistol was done by one of the soldiers in wood, so that they could be seen, but he never used that during World War I.
So one of his soldiers carved a wooden pistol to look like a real pistol, and he would keep it in his holster because it appeared to be real, so he would look appropriate, but he did not want a weapon.
In case of inspection, just that could be point.
And did during the fascist era, did he continue to practice medicine?
He could practice medicine in a very surreptitious way because he was the physician, the personal physician of Admiral Ribalta, that was the #2 with the expedition of Balbo. Admiral was a fireman and he was just close to Italo Balbo, and he was protected by the fascists.
Stefano was your great-grandfather, is that correct?
Yes, was my great-grandfather.
And who was his son or daughter related to your father?
He had two sons, Pietro and Agostino, from the name of the maternal grandfather, Giuseppina Parravicini. Stefano died around 1878, and Agostino Molteni became a textile engineer, and he met some group interested in around the beginning of 1900 to work with looms. Instead of used by hands like the looms were done in the past of 6 or 7 centuries, that became in France, in Lyon, the jacquard. And my grandfather Agostino, when he was around 22, 23 years old, went to work as a blue-collar worker in Lyon, in France, learned those jacquard, and he came back with a Signor Bernasconi, an engineer also, built up a textile with 40 looms. In 1937, when he died, there were 3,500 looms, and the silk company was the stronger in Italy.
The silk company, your father, Enrico Molteni, was working for the silk company, correct?
Yes.
And he learned the business from his father, correct?
Yes.
And his transition into the business was during the fascist era, is that true?
Yes.
And how did, let me ask you, how did your father, Enrico, meet your mother?
They met, my father and my mother met because the physician my nonno Emil, his name, had a villa in Cernobbio, on a little town on the Como Lake. And the factory, one of the factory for the textile was also in Cernobbio. My father, Enrico, was born in 1907. And after he became a textile engineer and he served the military as a lieutenant in the Grenadiers, just went as working as a blue collar in Oerlikon, because in Zurich, because Switzerland at that time came up with better looms than the French and Lyon and the Italian industry, and this set up a factory with the looms from Oerlikon, Swiss-German, and the factory went up after World War II.
So he, like his father, went and worked the looms as a blue-collar worker to
Yes.
learn the trade, and
Yes.
then came back and worked his way further up into management
Yes.
in the textile factory, correct?
Exactly.
And during the fascist era, he was going to be an Alpino, but he was transferred to a different regiment. Why?
He was transferred, he was very tall, and he had a lot of pressure to be very patriotic and serve as a career officer. He never wanted to do that, but he loves the mountains. Our land is a land of mountains, and he will try to be an officer of the mountain troops. They were probably the best troops, best trained troop in Italy. The one who fought in the Russian front and broke down the Russian front, able to retreat close to Stalingrad. And during the fascist period, he was a member of the fascists. But he was also very loyal to the King of Italy, an officer of the army. He fought in Yugoslavia, and that came a point.
Your father, during the war, fought in Yugoslavia against Tito, correct?
Yes, the communist partisan. It was a terrible war.
A lot of partisan guerrilla war, atrocities.
Yes, just people beheaded, people just terrible.
He survived that war, and
Yes, he survived, and since he played soccer and he broke a leg, one of medical officers said that he should go back. On the other hand, since he was very, very knowledgeable in the silk business, he started for the fascist Italian government, the royal government, to make silk for the parachutes. And the Italian parachutes were very good. When Mussolini was discharged by the king, and then the German occupied northern Italy and built up the puppet state of Mussolini, the Germans, the Luftwaffe, put the factory where under the direction of my father under control, and he was making parachutes. He saved 350 young men that should have gone to the forced labor camps instead to work in the factory. And we had a little better rations for food during the war.
so he protected people from going to labor camps by having them work at the factory.
Yes,
And he prevented them from being taken away, correct?
yes. On
Now-
the other hand, the communist partisans and the opposition were considering him a traitor because he was working for the Germans. If he would have not worked for the Germans, probably the factory and the entire population could have been deported in Germany, all of us.
To a camp.
Yes.
And in fact, I remember as a young boy you telling me how when Italy capitulated during the war and the Germans came down, The Germans would control the day, the partisans at night, terrible atrocities. But one story that stuck in my mind is how your mother and you, and your father, you hid some two Jewish children in the cellar and helped get them smuggled to Switzerland. Can you please tell that event, that story?
At that time we were leaving because the house in Milano for my grandfather was destroyed, and in the villa in Chernobyl. And our villa was bordering with a beautiful old villa that was owned by a Jewish family. The two kids could not go to school. They had only a private teacher, and they were playing in their own garden. One day that I was playing myself, I was about 11, in my garden, the two boys were thrown through the wall that was separating the two villas by the gardener that uttered in dialect Tudesk, German, and the two boys were in my place. We took them in the cellar.
Papa, you recall the gardener saying Tudesk means Germans in the Comasque dialect, and he put the two Jewish children over the wall into your garden. Is that right?
Yes.
And then what happened?
I brought home and we hid them in our cellar because they could have just checked all the other houses to see whether they could be there. The fact that the German found a Jewish in your house means that you automatically, you and the family, were deported to Auschwitz or Buchenwald or one of those concentration camps.
And then you were 11 at the time, correct? You took the children to the local pastor priest, Don Marmory,
Yes.
who had an underground network to smuggle
Yes.
Jewish children
Yes.
and political people into Switzerland, which is nearby.
Yes, just I took them in the evening just to see Dr. Marmory, and he accepted. The parents were always found because they were not home when the Germans came. So just they were able to reach Switzerland and be safe. The family was safe. One of the girl is just was a famous oncologist, became a famous oncologist in Milano. Don Luigi Marmory was captured by the Gestapo, tortured up to death, and he died under torture.
Because he would not disclose the underground network
Yes.
smuggling Jewish people and political people
Yes.
out of Italy into Switzerland.
Yes.
Another family that your family was friends with, the Jewish family, the parents, you tried to get a note for them not to come back to the home because the Germans were there, but the Germans were able to capture them, correct?
Yes.
And what happened to that family is they were sent to the prison and under torture, were forced to humiliations, eating their feces, and then they were killed under torture.
Yes.
So it was very serious, this issue about smuggling people into Switzerland, Jewish people, because when the Nazis came over, the anti-Semitic laws were actually were being enforced and beyond that. And so that's part of the reason your family and other families tried to help. Is that true?
Yes.
Those experiences of the war, they still trouble you today at 84 years of age, correct?
Yes, they trouble me, and one of the things that trouble me more, I have dreams and some nightmares, because we had been thrown out from our villa. We went in the house of our gardener that was much closer to the Jewish villa. And the Jewish villa was so beautiful and old that had excellent cellars. The cellars were making jails and torture rooms.
By the Germans?
By the Germans. At night, the Germans, they were torturing the prisoners, and I was hearing the screams, and it's still a nightmare for me hearing those people screaming under torture.
You survived the war years, and then you end up deciding to not go into your family's work, your family's business in the silk trade or in other business type.
No, I always had a tremendous influence from my grandfather, the physicians. And we were talking always about cells, and eventually I said that I wanted to study medicine. It was really interesting because I should have just go to join the corporation. Eventually my father went into the artificial silk, working with Bamberg Bayer, that have big factories. And he worked until he was 76, 77, teaching at the School of Medical Engineering for artificial silk, and he was going to Leverkusen and just build up all of the silk, especially for fashion type of silk tissues.
But your interest was medicine. Where did you go to medical school?
I went for 4 years to the old University of Camillo Golgi, where my great-great-grandfather, Agostino Paravicini, got his PhD.
And that's the University of Pavia?
Pavia, for 4 years. Then University of Pavia is a small town, and the clinical department were not as much strong. And I was able to, with my grades, to enter the University of Milano, the Department of Medicine. It was very difficult. Only 6 students were taking every year.
And you came to America because you were a Fulbright scholar, is that?
Yes.
Okay. And what year did you come to America?
I came in America in 1960, and again, that was something because I went to University of Illinois, where one of the professors of pathology was Dr. Conrad Levi Pirani, a Jewish, just in 1939 got his medical degree, and the fascist police expelled him, and he looked for a job as a physician in the United States and landed and became professor of pathology.
While you were studying in America, you met my mother, your
Yes.
wife, and how did you meet her? Was it a birthday party in Chicago?
It was my birthday party. She was coming from Cincinnati because she was doing the residency in plastic surgery. She was an assistant professor at University of Bologna. And we met there. Then for Christmas, I went to Cincinnati because I was curious to see America. And then just, I do not know what happened, but I got the Valentine from her on 14th of February. I went down for Easter, and then we decided to become engaged, and then we married.
Do you remember when you first met that she said you were interesting, but no one could ever marry a person like you?
Yes, exactly.
So you went back to Italy and were married, and then I was born. And before my brother Ronald was born, you decided to come to America. Is that correct?
Yes, because I had an interesting position in the drug company, but for her was very, very difficult. She was told by a surgeon that he could not see a woman surgeon. And for her, a woman in his operating room could only be his nurse, not another physician.
Eventually you came to the United States, and your son, my brother Ronald, was born. Initially we lived in Buffalo, New York, correct?
Yes, I was with a research career development award and a fellowship for studying pathology under the guidance of a pupil of Dr. Shelier, and then eventually worked with Dr. Shelier on the stress theory and different hormones regulating stress. On the other hand, your mother was head and neck surgeon and make her career, and eventually being very, very successful. And we worked together, doing research together working clinically, getting different results, and we moved. From Buffalo, we moved to Kansas. She opened her office on the country club plaza in Kansas, and then in North Kansas City and Liberty Hospital. And then after 7 years, we were offered, and at the time, my postdoctoral fellow was Dr. Kavi Bank Mullis, that eventually won the Nobel Prize for PCR.
At Kansas University Medical Center, you worked in the pathology department,
Yes.
an MD, PhD,
Yes,
and the success with your research eventually had you recruited to go to Northwestern in Chicago.
yes, eventually, yes. I was, and I spent 20 years as a director of the laboratory chemistry and endocrine at Northwestern Memorial Hospital and professor of pathology at Northwestern University. In the big project that we did together with other 14 clinics in the United States, we had the hypertension detection and follow-up program, and when we won the Lasker Award, because we demonstrated that even mild hypertension in young people should be taken care, and even in children.
And the Lasker Award, I think that was in 1988?
Was 1982.
1982. And that's a significant award. It's the highest scientific award in the United States for a scientist clinician, correct?
Yes.
And in winning that award, you in fact have joked that you are on the short list for the Nobel, but you probably would only get it posthumously, if ever.
Well, I do not know what's happened, but even one of my major teachers, Shaley, mentor, never won the Lasker Award, understanding the theory of the stress. What we are doing, and I'm going to work when we will, there is all of this kind of work in fat embolism with a different type of pulmonary damage, and we demonstrate that certain hormones are essential, and we can protect by using those hormones from the pulmonary damage. Premature children, for example, fat embolism and other things like that. And I had also the opportunities to be lecturer. I was invited for the International Congress of Pulmonary Fibrosis at in Heidelberg, in Dresden, Oxford, Cambridge, Perth, Australia, Dijon, France, and in Dublin, the Queen College at in Ireland.
At the Trinity College in Ireland.
Yes, Trinity College.
And that was just 2 years ago when you were 82.
Yes. And
in the United States, you also taught at Harvard for a period of time.
Yes, I was in sabbatical at Harvard for 18 months.
And you and my mother, your wife, worked on a book on the thermodynamics of burn injuries and hypertension, correct?
Yes, and I published 250 scientific articles. With your mother working on hypertension in patients with burns when she was the director of the research at the Burn Center, Loyola University, we published about 90 articles, and we edited a book where we had people, Bode from Harvard, Artursson from Uppsala in Sweden. We had been at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and I'm still keeping publishing and working.
And you, I see that you were wearing the pin
Yes,
there.
where they gave me the kangaroo as a sign of, not as a professor emeritus, because usually the professor emeritus stopped to work. I'm still working. And this is a kind of recognition for the effort that I did for the 22 years at University of Missouri and at Kansas City. And I got also the special Betty Dries Mentorship Award. That is a lifetime award for the best mentors for the faculty.
And in fact, your students have given you awards as the best mentor from your students themselves.
Yes. I had mentored between the residents in medicine, pharmacology, anesthesia, and pathology, and medical students, 92 students in my life.
And not only have you educated students, but you've educated your sons and your grandchildren as well, correct?
Well, just I'm trying just I'm very proud of my granddaughters, that 4 of them, they make the National Scholarship Award, they won different prizes. And what I try to do to my medical students and my granddaughter is to ask for questions, ask why, make a future, just not to memorize and not asking what is going on, and try to understand the reasons that we do not understand much. We are tremendously ignorant, at least in biomedical and biological sciences. All of the youth development of the genes, all the genetics, when now we have the fact that people from Nigeria have the Neanderthal genes like we have in Europe, like they have with the Denisov gene and Neanderthal in China. And our population moved, and that's the things. All of racism, all the very, very biological theories, they are not valid anymore. And we do not know what will be 20 years from now.
Your experience as an educated person your whole life, and having survived things in life, wars and politics, what do you think are the most important things you want your grandchildren to know as the essentials of living a good life, a life well lived?
The most important is to look around, think, ask for questions, try to get logic, and not accept something for granted. There is always something more to learn, and is very important. I always tell to my medical students, it's not enough to memorize 3,000 questions for the pass the national board and be doctor. A doctor needs to interact with the people, talk to the people, have a strong, large, basic, humanistic education. There is no way only to learn one section. You have to have your basis, because the humanistic education teach you how to think. And that is what is the most important in our life.
Papa, you've been a tremendous role model for my brother Ronald and I, and our wives and our daughters. And we love you very much, and we are so grateful to have had Mama and you in our lives, and you've made all the difference in the world for all of us. Is there anything else you'd like to say to your granddaughters?
I always will recommend them to be very assured of themselves, never got discouraged, fight, because our life is definitely a fight until the end. But we cannot afford in this world that the forces of evil, and you know quite well, because everybody that is decent learn to recognize the force of evil should prevail. We should work for keeping well and give hope to our lives and the lives of everybody.
We love you, Papa.